There is a persistent assumption in modern survival thinking that nutrition is a technological achievement, that dense, reliable food comes from factories, supplements, or animal systems that require constant inputs. What's often missed is that the most intensively studied survival crop of the 20th century was neither exotic nor rare. It grew on every continent, rebuilt exhausted soils, fed armies in crisis, and at one point was seriously considered as a primary human food source during wartime scarcity. Then, just as quietly, it disappeared from serious discussion. This episode isn't about a miracle plant or a suppressed secret. It's about how institutional priorities, military logistics, and industrial food systems sidelined a crop that once sat at the center of survival research. If you value careful historical analysis like this, subscribe to the Survival Record now, because stories like this tend to vanish unless someone keeps them alive. What we now call animal feed was once studied as a human survival staple. The plant in question is alfalfa. Today it's dismissed as livestock fodder or, just a garnish in health food stores, but that framing is actually quite historically recent. During the early 20th century, alfalfa was one of the most researched plants in the world. Agronomists, military planners, and public health officials studied it not because it was fashionable, but because it solved multiple problems at once. Alfalfa contains more protein per calorie than milk, alongside a rather dense profile of vitamins and minerals. Depending on soil conditions, it provides vitamins A, C, E, K, most B vitamins, calcium, magnesium, iron, potassium, and trace elements that are rarely discussed in conventional nutrition. Early analyses identified upward of 90 identifiable nutrients and phytochemicals. More importantly for wartime planners, alfalfa could grow in depleted soils, fix nitrogen, and regenerate farmland damaged by overuse or bombardment. This made it valuable not just as food, but as infrastructure. War, really forced governments to rethink what food security actually meant. During the First World War and again during the Second, governments faced a recurring problem: how to feed populations and armies when supply lines failed. Meat production required land, water, and time that many nations just no longer had. Dairy spoiled quickly. Grains were, vulnerable to transport disruption. Alfalfa, by contrast, could be grown locally, harvested repeatedly, dried for storage, and processed into meal. In several countries, including the United States, Germany, and the Soviet Union, alfalfa meal was studied as a protein supplement for human consumption. During the 1930s, United States Department of Agriculture researchers experimented with alfalfa flour added to bread. The goal was not novelty, but resilience. Bread fortified with alfalfa retained protein and micronutrients even when wheat quality declined. In the Soviet Union, where famine and soil exhaustion were chronic concerns, alfalfa was promoted as a dual-use crop feed for animals when possible and emergency nutrition when not. This flexibility really mattered in a system that could not rely on uninterrupted trade. Military planners, honestly, cared less about taste and more about systems. From a military perspective, alfalfa's appeal was logistical. It reduced dependence on long supply chains. It restored soil without chemical fertilizer. It could be cultivated near bases and transport hubs. Most importantly, it blurred the line between civilian and military agriculture. During World War II, the United States military explored concentrated leaf protein extracts derived from alfalfa. These were not fringe experiments. They were conducted by respected institutions trying to solve protein shortages without diverting grain from civilian populations. The science was sound, but the timing was wrong. By the end of the war, Industrial agriculture had proven it could outproduce small-scale systems under peacetime conditions. That success, well, it really reshaped priorities. After 1945, the central concern of food policy shifted from survival to efficiency and profit. Synthetic fertilizers replaced soil regeneration. Meat consumption became a symbol of prosperity. Crops were evaluated less on resilience and more on yield per acre under ideal conditions. Alfalfa no longer fit the narrative. It was just too decentralized, too adaptable, and honestly too difficult to commodify for human food markets. It thrived without proprietary inputs. It could be grown by individuals without corporate dependency. In a system increasingly built around scale and control, those qualities became liabilities. So alfalfa was reclassified. It became animal feed. Its role in human nutrition research quietly ended, not because it failed, but because it succeeded in ways that no longer aligned with institutional incentives. The idea of erasure is less dramatic and actually more instructive. No agency banned alfalfa. No document ordered it forgotten. Instead, it was erased through neglect. Funding disappeared. Research priorities shifted. Nutrition science, narrowed its focus to isolated vitamins rather than whole plants. This pattern repeats throughout history. Knowledge tied to scarcity often fades during prosperity, only to be rediscovered during crisis. Alfalfa's story, honestly, mirrors that of victory gardens, home food preservation, and local seed saving. Each was once considered essential, then treated as obsolete, and later revived when systems failed. What survivalists understand is what institutions often ignore. For those concerned with preparedness, alfalfa offers lessons beyond nutrition. It demonstrates the value of crops that serve multiple roles: food, soil repair, animal feed, and emergency reserves. It challenges the assumption that protein must come from animals or industrial processing. It also exposes a blind spot in modern survival planning, which quite often prioritizes short-term storage over long-term regeneration. Alfalfa is not glamorous. It requires knowledge to process for human consumption. It demands patience. But it embodies a form of resilience that wartime planners understood well. The ability to sustain life when conditions degrade, not when they are optimized. History shows that what gets forgotten is often what mattered most. When historians examine 20th century warfare, they tend to focus on weapons and battles. Less attention is paid to agricultural decisions that determined whether societies could endure prolonged stress. Crops like alfalfa did not win wars directly, but they shaped the capacity to survive them. The disappearance of alfalfa from human nutrition discourse is not a mystery when viewed through this lens. It was a casualty of success, abundance, and shifting values. Understanding that process matters because the conditions that once made alfalfa essential are not as distant as we like to believe. Remembering overlooked survival strategies is not about nostalgia. It's about maintaining a wider field of vision when planning for uncertain futures. Alfalfa's history reminds us that resilience is often quiet, unprofitable, and easily dismissed until it's needed again. If you value careful, unsensational historical analysis that treats survival as a serious subject, subscribe to the Survival Record and share this video with others who care about understanding what history tried to leave behind.